thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and does not represent legal or accounting advice or counsel and should not be seen as such. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only, a conversation. We make no promises or assertions on how this information will impact your business, your personal life, or financial well-being. The information relayed does not imply endorsement or offer opposition to any specific organization, product, or services. Welcome to Shift. I'm your host, Lori Power, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thanks for joining us today, Robert. I really enjoyed our last conversation. I think you left me with a lot more questions that I wanted answers and conversation pieces that I wanted to dive into. I know this, again, will be just the beginning of future conversations to have. Can you take a moment and introduce yourself and your business and why you do what you do?
Okay, well, my name is Rob Welke, and I am a certified exit planning advisor. My background is I have a Bachelor of Commerce in Finance, and again, that certified exit planning advisor designation. Have spent 35 years in working and building businesses. I grew a number of different businesses and ultimately sold three of them. And it was after I sold out of my last business that I realized that business owners just aren't ready for sale. And I started to look at, okay, what did I learn from that exercise and what should I be doing differently and where am I going to go in the future? And I got into this loop of looking at uh, understanding business a little bit better. So I took some courses in change management, leadership, and strategic planning. And that led me into taking a look at the exit planning arena because I came across this report that indicated that at that time, about 52% of all Canadian businesses hope to be out of business in 10 years. And that kind of startled me. So I dug deeper and dug deeper and dug deeper and ended up getting my certified exit planning advisor as a result of that. But it really was all around understanding that we have a massive problem facing us, which is 75% of all Canadian business owners want to be out of business in 10 years, and they're not preparing for it. They're not getting ready for it. They don't understand what needs to be done because, quite frankly, they're not business people, the vast majority of them. And there is a lot that goes into it that we didn't know really until quite recently when people started doing research into this. So now my goal now is to help business owners prepare themselves for a successful exit and help them build sustainable high value companies that will continue to operate after they're gone.
We're going to talk today about business valuation, and we're going to pair that up with the business plan. However, if I went into most business owners and I said, what's your business plan? Do you have a business plan? They would look at me like I had four heads and they would say, of course I have a business plan. Do you know what your business is worth? Well, of course I know what my business is worth. So why, when you go in to talk to a business about business valuation, what's one of the first things that you do to overcome that significant emotional related pain point where they're going to say, of course we know what we're worth, and of course we have a plan?
Well, I tend to be more of a pragmatic because after many years in business, I just cut to the chase. My first question is, how do you know? How exactly is it that you have come to that opinion of value for your business? Did you go out and get an independent assessment done? Did you hire a chartered business valuator? Do you have a mechanism for valuing your business? And where did that mechanism come from? Or did your friend have a similar business that he sold for this price and you think yours is the same? Because quite frankly, at the end of the day, the two are not the same. So we have a bit of a frank conversation around business valuation, and we talk about the things in his business that he are making him successful. And I focus a lot on the intangible capital because I don't look at the financial performance because financial performance can be driven by great people, great processes, great systems, all that kind of stuff. So I focus on, okay, tell me about your team. Tell me about your market. Tell me about your clients. What do you do for them? How many have you got? How diversified are you? So I get a better sense of what the business is all about. And then we can then start to have a bit of a more frank conversation about, well, you need to understand that this, and this impact value. And the value drivers, believe it or not, are significant players in determining the ultimate sellable value of a business.
Let's first talk about, do a recap on de-risking, and then let's go into those value drivers in a little bit more detail. What does de-risking look like to a particular customer when it comes to the value of their business?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. First and foremost is the way that we look at it is people are the single biggest factor of risk in a business. Because if you don't have people, you don't have a business, right? You have to have the right team in place. So we focus a lot of our initial energy on understanding the team, their interrelationships, how they work together, and whether or not they're the right people for the roles that they're in. They might not be in the right role. They just might have not have the right activities they're pursuing. So that's part of the de-risking is that. And we look at market de-risking, we look at brand de-risking, and we also look at structural de-risking in terms of both corporate design. And what I mean by that is this is more in specific to the owners, which is what do your shareholder agreements look like? Do you have your share structure all sorted out? Do you have holding companies in place? Is it an operating company, a holding company? Do you own any shares personally? We try to understand that as well, because that will impact ultimately down the road the available options that will be the best for them in terms of tax optimizing for sale. So that's one piece. And then there's the other financial risk de-risking piece. Okay, if somebody were to hit you with what's your will for your business, right? One of my big ones that I love talking to owners is about, okay, you got a will for your house, right? For your family, or you know your wife's going to get great. Who's going to run your business if you get hit by a truck? Because it's not going to be your wife. I'll tell you right now. She will be in mourning. So she's not going to be interested the least bit in running the business. So what's your plan to run the business in the event of a catastrophic incident? So all of those are kinds of conversations we have, and we start to work on those things if we do engage with them.
And for all those that know me, and I'm in insurance, I specialize in employee group benefits. But for all those financial planners out there that know how many buy-sell agreements are unfunded or underfunded, this really is going back to our initial conversation of the importance of seeking that financial advice from your financial planner and knowing where you want to go personally after the business in order to direct, as you had said, there's the business plan and there's the personal plan, and they do have to meet at some point in time.
Yeah.
And making that assumption that your spouse is going to take over your business just because when they've never been part of the business, I think might be an assumption that that spouse at the end of the day is going, just liquidate it, I'm done.
Yeah, and that actually is what happens, quite frankly, in many cases. I mean, we all know that the vast majority of business sales are due to death or an unexpected offer, or sorry, not death, a significant health incident or an unexpected offer, unsolicited offer. So if half of that is a catastrophic event, I could guarantee you right now that unless your wife is really analytical and has no emotion, she's not going to be interested in running the business.
That leads us into how are private companies valued? What is the typical value?
Well, there's no way to peg a specific value, but there's lots of different ways that you can determine value. And the ones that we tend to fall back on, we've identified, we know that there's about 10 different ways you can value a business, right? But we tend to fall back on typically earnings multiples, asset value, or similar value in the marketplace as the kinds of things that we would look at in terms of how do we determine the value. And ironically, it's not that difficult to go out and do an assessment on a company to find out a rough value. It's not a value that I would take to the bank or say, go sell it for this value, but it's a benchmark value. And it's important that a business owner gets a benchmark value that's realistic and in line with their specific company, because it becomes a starting point for them to align their future financial plans, strategic plans in the company to achieve the goals that they want to achieve.
Would you suggest, though, when somebody's getting a basic valuation done of the business, it really doesn't take into the 4 Cs, right? It
It
doesn't
does
take
not,
into
no.
social capital, the human capital, the marketing capital, the procedures and processes that are in place. So if all we're valuing is the assets, what we have at the end of the day is a fire sale.
That's correct. Yeah. And typically, if you're going to sell it for that, it's going to be a depleted asset value, not a replacement value. So, I mean, it's really critically important that business owners understand there's more than just asset value and financial performance that dictate the value of a company. And in fact, I'm going to posit that the four C's that we talk about, you and I understand, which are human capital, social capital, customer capital, and structural capital, are probably as important, if not more important, than financial performance and asset value in terms of determining the value of a company. Because if those are aligned and they are operating at what we call best in class, then now you have a company that is going to be substantially higher in value than the sum of its parts.
Well, for sure, you can only imagine buying a manufacturing company and it's been valued for the worth and the upkeep of all the equipment in the building as well as the building and the land itself. And nobody knows how to use the equipment and you have no customers at the door.
Yep.
What have you purchased?
Yeah. A lead weight.
Lead weight. So when you're a private company and you're being valued, there's 10 different methods that you say that a company can be valued. Give me a couple of examples of what that might look like.
Well, one of the things that we look at, like I said, we tend to focus on the three most common ones because unless they're in a very unique industry that there's not a lot of competitive players out there, they wouldn't go to a competitor, a company specific kind of valuation. They typically go to an industry sector valuation. So there's a lot of information out there, including information from Stats Can, that you can actually peg a company within its industry sector. And as we talk about when we first talk with a business owner about valuation on multiples or with for an asset value, we tend to talk about, you know what, you're in a specific industry, and in that industry there tends to be a normal range of valuation for those companies. Technology companies have a valuation range, maybe from 1x revenue to 10x revenue. Oil and gas service companies might have a 2x EBITDA to 5.5x EBITDA. Those numbers come from somewhere. And typically where they come from is private equity. And one of the things we like to tell business owners, and it kind of shocks them, is that you have absolutely no control over how your company is going to be valued at the end of the day. Your industry values your company a certain way, and that's from historical performance and from private equity assessments over time, and a database that's been accumulated over many years, right? So you have no control over the range of value, whether it's 2 to 5 times or whether it's 1 to 10 times. You have no control. But what you do have control over is where you lie within that range of value. And that is an eye opener for some business owners because they don't realize that, oh, that's in my control. I can determine how much my value is going to be worth by what I do in my company. And that's the real paradigm shift we need to get them to make in order for us to help them create value, additional or incremental value in their company. Because once they realize that, no, that's all on them, then they can start to do the things that are necessary to make that happen.
Let's break that down a little bit more if you'll
Okay.
give me some leeway here.
Okay.
Because location is screaming at me
Yes.
at this. So I'm going to take a comparison and say that if I were a business in downtown Vancouver and I'm surrounded by all of my ideal customers and I'm doing XYZ widgets and I take that same company and I pair it up and then I have somebody up in Fort Nelson, nothing wrong with Fort Nelson, right? I'm doing exactly the same thing in Fort Nelson, but I'm long distance and my talent base is limited to how many people actually want to live in Fort Nelson. And so when it comes to those value drivers and our range, I would suggest that the person with the company in downtown Vancouver has a different range of value than the company that's in Fort Nelson, be due to they may do exactly the same thing. So keeping all other things the same, but the range of value would be different because of their location as just one of those key items that might come into play.
That could be true. That could be true. And I say that,
I'm reaching for an example here, Robert, that so we can get a better idea on that range of value.
yeah. Well, and the range of value, really interesting. I mean, we can find that range of value, right? And it's some of it is going to be market dependent. And when I say by market dependent, location dependent, and some of it is going to be industry dependent, right? Those two companies in Vancouver and Fort Nelson may have a slightly different range of value. Like it may be a little bit broader or narrower, but one of the things that they do have is they have the ability to determine where they are on that range of value. So
Right.
at the end of the
That's what I
day,
wanted to get to, was that
right?
the ability to get to that range.
Yeah,
That's what I really wanted to build a deeper understanding on.
yeah. See, we talk about in our industry, we talk about best in class performance, and best in class performance means you are operating better than any other company in your sector in terms of the way you manufacture, deliver, supply, deal with clients, systems, processes, everything. You're at the top end. You're delivering a much higher level of service to your clients, and if you're there, that's what we call best in class. Best in class essentially is an 80% solution, right? Once you've hit best in class, you're the best you can be in your industry. But you can go beyond best in class for valuation purposes, because if you have a unique IP or a unique offering that nobody else is doing, you can bust through that level, quite frankly, and become a strategic acquisition. And when I say strategic, you now are falling outside of that range of value. So that company in Vancouver may be subject to the same range of value as the company in Fort Nelson, but because they have a very specific market with a high level of customers and higher profitability and deliver their service in a way that the guys in Fort Nelson can't, they may be a strategic opportunity for somebody to come along and say, I like what you guys are doing. I want to add you to my mix, and you are worth more to me than you are to you. That's what strategic value means at the end of the day, right? I am
And I
worth
think
more to the
that's where it could come into play for that company in Vancouver, or that
exactly.
company in Fort Nelson can well outweigh the value of that company in Vancouver if they're best in class and able then to jump through it, because to become that strategic acquisition.
Yes. I mean, that's the ideal for any business owners, to become a strategic acquisition and break through the range of value. The challenge though is not everybody can do it. And it's a small percentage of people that can, but it's a percentage of people that are looking at new markets, new opportunities, new ways of doing things, and are looking outside the box and are prepared to make an investment to do a leap of faith into something that nobody else has done, or they've identified a market that nobody else is able to service effectively. So, I mean, ideally, we want to help clients get to that level, but the real target is getting them to best in class, because if they're a best in class, that means they're better than everybody else below them.
And this isn't an overnight solution. I think that at the end of the day is what we're trying to communicate here, is that in order to get to best in class, I'm not just going to turn around today and say, oh, by July, I'm going to be best in class, or
No,
by, 20 months from now, I'm going to be best in class. This is where working with a strategic team in a collaborative manner is going to help us de-risk and create value into our
correct.
organization.
Correct. You do not become best in class overnight. It's I'm not going to say literally impossible, but because best in class means that your people are behind it as well. And it's a cultural paradigm shift for many companies to get to best in class. And we all know that
It's
takes time to manage to change culture.
it sure does. Change management doesn't happen overnight. You talked briefly last time about the three M's. I think this is where a good reminder of the three M's comes into play when we're aiming our goal being best in class. Can you refresh us on what are the three M's,
Right.
please?
The 3M is our own change management model. We looked at all the different change management literature out there and realized it boiled down to being able to do three things. And we call them the 3Ms. First one is the mandate. For change to be accepted and actually implemented, it has to be mandated. The person at the top and everybody in the company has to be doing it. You cannot, there's no exclusions, there's no get hall passes, etc. Everybody has to be on board. Second one is marketing. In order for change to be implemented effectively, you actually have to get people that want to do it. And to do it, You have to market it. And we call it marketing, but it's really selling the people on the solution. And when we sell them, we need to answer three key questions. First one is, what's in it for me? Because nobody's going to make a change unless they see that there's a benefit for them. Second one is, why should I trust you? What's the why behind this decision? Why are we doing this? Why is this change happening? And the last one is, why should I care? Right? Um, so if we can get those three questions answered within a change initiative, then we're 2/3 of the way there. And the last thing is the last M is maintain. If we don't put all the systems, processes, support processes in place to make sure that those people cannot fail, don't give them the option to fail, then we'll be successful. But if we don't put everything possible in there to make sure that they're successful, then it's never going to take effect. Because if there's one person that doesn't want to do it, it can derail the whole process. And that's why you're always marketing it.
I really like the way that you outline your three M's, and I would be remiss to say that from my perspective in employee group benefits and always looking at the employee side of things and that during that transition, I think you can give an employee during that transition no greater gift than the longevity of their position, and you give them their future. And very often, I think as we drive value into the companies and we understand that our people are so important, but we forget that that gift, that simple gift of saying that you are important to this process, I cannot do it without you. The new owner is going to need you to continue and carry on the legacy that we created here, is the gift of what I believe your three M's really do achieve at the end of the day.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that it all, in the second M, we talk about what's in it for me. Why should I care? Right? That why is critically important, because if you want to drive towards best in class, people need to understand, well, what's the purpose of best in class? Right? And the purpose of best in class in the context of business succession is not necessarily to create the most value for the business owner. It's to create the best sustainable company that we can with the people and the processes that we have, and give them a future. Because at the end of the day, what we are creating is not the business owner's future. The business owner's future is a pile of cash. What we're creating is a company that these people are proud to work in, want to work in, and are empowered and driven to success with. So that's really what we want to do, is we want to create a mindset that they are the future of the company, and they are integrally important, and everybody in the company has got to have that vision and has to have bought into that. And the only way you do that is through culture, right? Is building the culture around that.
I like what you had said previously as well, when you had said, the employees don't care if the employer walked away with a $15 million because they just sold the company. It means nothing to them.
Exactly.
That's not their money to spend. What they're looking for is, has the company created enough value that I can then get a raise, that I can be valued myself for what I bring to the table?
Yeah.
What are some resistant points that you come across from business owners when you start them down this journey?
One of the first ones is they think everything happens overnight, right? And it takes time. And this is, we had a really interesting comment from one of our business owner clients a couple of weeks ago. He said, when we first started this process, I really wasn't quite sure. I had a vision. I understood what you were trying to do, but I wasn't quite sure. And it was about 10 months in when I realized, okay, now I get what you guys are doing. I could see what's happening here. And it took the employees another 2 or 3 months before they realized that, hey, I see what's happening here. And that really came about in our annual review. And we sat down with them and said, let's take a look at what you actually accomplished last year. And that particular company accomplished 28 major initiatives in a year, and increased their revenue substantially over what they had from the year before. And it didn't even hurt for them to do that. Like, it was almost like it was too easy. And a lot of it was because we built the right process, we put the right team in place, and while they had the right team, we just showed them how to work together more effectively.
And you need to track it. You can't measure what isn't tracked.
Correct.
And by starting down this process, would you agree that you are now starting to track a different set of metrics? And by tracking that different set of metrics, you can see where you were on the map, where you are in the journey, and the destination still to come.
Right. And that really boils back down to the strategic plan. And there's two sets of metrics that we look at. One is the owner's metrics, which is okay, this is the value of the company when we first started. This is the value of the company where we are now. And these are how the value drivers changed, right, in the scorecard. That's the owner's piece. Then there's the company piece, which is okay, how many things did we accomplish this year? What were the initiatives we undertook? Who worked with who and what did we get to? What was the financial performance like? How much did you actually do in terms of work this year versus this quarter versus last quarter? Those are the kind of metrics that the business employees want to see to be able to track. How are we doing? And the owner wants to see how's the value going, right? So we have two sets of metrics that we need to follow. We need to track for different purposes, but they actually both are aligned to the same purpose at the end of the day.
This is a fascinating conversation, and one I know that I will want to still continue to go further with. The next time we have a conversation, I think what I'd like to do is we've talked about how to engage that employer in that conversation of why we want to seek value. I'd like to go into a little bit more about the teams, the outsourced teams, not just the internal teams, but the outsourced teams, the financial planner, the value coach, the lawyer, the accountant, and how they work together, because that's a bit of a scary topic, Robert, for a business owner, because now you've taken them through that de-risking process, you've started them down the road, they feel it, but now I have to pull in more people to trust with my laundry, so to
Yeah,
speak, right? And I'd like to delve into that a little bit more of your game.
absolutely. Yeah, and actually it's interesting because we're actually working on building an entire end-to-end process around that with the checklists and the steps and the agendas and the meetings that you have to go through with the business owner and the teams, because quite frankly that's the owner's team, and then there's also the business team, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens if we need to bring a fractional HR person in? What happens if we need to bring a new benefits advisor in? What happens if we need to bring a chief marketing officer in to help them understand how to build a better marketing plan? All of those are people as well, but they're not people that the owner needs to talk to for his plan. That's the plan team. Then there's the owner plan team. And some of the
And
people
what happens if we're derailed? What's the contingency plan if one of the 5Ds hits? Right?
exactly.
What happens if there's a divorce, a derailment, a disability, death?
Yep. And divorce is a big one, especially for these business owners, right? Because their business is their baby that never leaves home,
Yeah,
right? And as a result, sometimes their spouses go, "I'm done. I had kids for 20 years. They're up and out of the house, but I still have this baby that you're dealing with every day that we need to do something about." And it's funny because I was talking to one business owner a few years ago. We interviewed him, and he said, "Well, the reason I sold my business is my wife came to me and said, if you don't sell it, I'm divorcing you."
yeah. And how true is that, right? Like what happens on the personal side when the spouses don't align on what their expectations are? I
Yeah,
really want to delve into that a little bit more because there's a psychology of that, and that is absolutely fascinating. Just because I love my business and I love and it gives me strength and energy and moves me forward, does that necessarily mean that's going to be the same dynamic for my spouse? Who
yeah,
in that situation, yeah, the kids have left home, I'm ready to move into the next phase. And so one or the other gets left behind. And that is something that I believe that we need to build onto that contingency plan.
yeah. It's actually a friend of mine. Actually, my wife's cousin actually went out and bought a winery because after left his last job and sold his last company, his wife said after about 6 months, "If you don't do something, I'm going to scrug you in your sleep."
Well, that's that's a good spot to pause it up here. But let's continue that conversation then. And thank you so much for coming in today.
Oh,
This is
most welcome.
wonderfully insightful. I appreciate it.
Most welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity.